Kunja Bihari. Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari. Yashodanandana Brajajanaranjana. Yamunatira Vanachari. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Om Vishnu Pad Parahamsa Parivrajakacharya Ashtatara Shata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gop Gopinath Shamakund Radhakund Giri Govardhan Ki Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Shri Mayapur Dham Ki, Ganga Mai Ki, Yamuna Mai Ki, Bhakti Devi Ki, Tulasi Devi Ki, Transcendental Harinam, Sankirtan, Yagya Ki, Gaur Premanande, all glories to the simple devotees, All glories to the simple devotees. All glories to the simple devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. So today we are reading from the Nectar of Devotion. And we are on chapter number 9, entitled Further Consideration of Devotional Principles. And we're on the part entitled Singing. So let's start with some prayers. Nana Shastra Vicharane Kanipano Satarma Samstapako Lokanam Hitakarino Tribhuvane Manyo Sharanya Karo Radha Krishna Padara Vinda Bhajanan Nandena Mataliko Vande Rupa Sanatana Raghuyugo Shri Jiva Gopalako. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Katamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuttapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagarjatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Sadvadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostite Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Garadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So we're on chapter 9, further consideration of devotional principles. So in the previous chapter, chapter 8, we were going through the different offenses to be avoided in our discharge of devotional service. And then in chapter 9, there are more points on what can be done and what should be done to make advancement, like the wearing of tulsi beads and tilak and Vaishnava attire, accepting garlands, dancing before the deity, bowing down in front of the deity, and standing up to receive the Lord and following the deity, and then going to visit places of pilgrimage, circumambulating the temple of the deity. And then there's more details about worshipping the deity, and a lot of it is actually centered around deity worship. And a question might come up because we can understand that the Yuga Dharma in Kali Yuga is Harinam Sankirtan. So why so much deity worship? And my Guru Maharaj explained that because in the previous Yuga, a primary focus in order to achieve self-realization was actually deity worship. And that has overlapped into Kali Yuga. So this is a continuation from that. And we're still worshipping the deity. But later we will also read about the purifying effects of worshipping the deity by dressing them or touching them. It's purifying. It's purifying to worship the deity. But Srila Prabhupada also explained when they were going to install the deities at Krishna Balaram temple that the real installation took place when the Harinam went on. That was the real installation. But he still called all of the brahmanas to come and perform their yagya and install it in that way. because then the general public there would have accepted that this is an installation ceremony. But the real installation took place when Harinam Sankirtan, the chanting of the Lord's holy name, actually took place. So that is our primary focus in Kali Yuga, and all of the other processes of worship are meant to facilitate that. Okay, let us begin. So, singing. In the Linga Purana, there is a statement about glorifying and singing about the Lord. It is said there, a Brahmana who is constantly engaged in singing the glories of the Lord is surely elevated to the same planet as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Lord Krishna appreciates this singing even more than the prayers offered by Lord Shiva. This I was thinking about for quite some time, because we can understand that Lord Shiva is not an ordinary personality. There are the demigods who are considered far superior to any of us. They have so much opulence, so much wealth, and they're also devotees of the Lord. And then there's Lord Shiva, it's explained that he's actually situated on a platform above the demigods even. So here are these exalted personalities way beyond our conception, and Lord Shiva is even beyond them. So how is it that the singing of a devotee, even us, the constant singing, is more pleasing than Lord Shiva's prayers? Because Lord Shiva is also a devotee. He's also singing the glories of the Lord. And I was thinking about that. We also know that Lord Shiva, his singing is sometimes interrupted by requests from the Lord to fulfill the desires of the living entities, because that's his service. People are going to Lord Shiva and they're saying, please, can I have this? Can I have that? I want the house, I want the car, I want the job. And Lord Shiva is saying, okay, take it, so that I can get back to my bhajan. So he has to approach the Lord on behalf of the living entities. Please, Lord, can we have this and that for this living entity who is asking? So Lord Shiva himself is very renounced, but as a service to the living entities, he's fulfilling their material desires, and nothing can be awarded without the sanction of the Supreme Lord, so he's going to the Lord. So I was thinking that bhajan is a little interrupted by these material requests from the Lord. Although it is a service, still, I was thinking about this verse. Savaipum samparo dharmo yato bhakti radoksaje hetu kya pratihata yatma subrasidati. That devotional service should be a hetuki and apratihata, which means causeless and unbroken, in order to completely satisfy the self. So it should be unmotivated and uninterrupted. So if there is some material motivation in between our bhajan, that's not going to lead to that satisfaction. And if there is some interruption which would be caused by that very same thing, the desires, then again that will not completely satisfy the self. And we can understand that if it is unmotivated and it is uninterrupted, then the reason it's completely satisfying to the self is because all satisfaction comes from the Supreme Lord. When he is satisfied, we are satisfied. So if our bhajan is completely unmotivated and uninterrupted, we are satisfied, because that is most pleasing to the Lord. When we're continuously engaging in the chanting of the Lord's holy names, and we're continuously engaging in his service without any expectation in return. And just reading that sentence again, Lord Krishna appreciates this singing even more than the prayers offered by Lord Shiva. And it's referring to a Brahmana who is constantly engaged in singing the glories of the Lord. And then he's elevated to the same planet as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But we can also understand that such a Brahmana who is who is engaged in the service of the Lord, he's not just a Brahmana by name only. A person may be born in a so-called Brahminical family, but actually this kind of Brahmana who is engaged in the service of the Lord is also a Vaishnava. So there are the Brahmanas, and then And then the learned Brahmana can be referred to as a Vipra. But a Vaishnava is actually referred to as being the postgraduate stage of being a Brahmana. So a Brahmana who is progressing in spiritual life actually necessarily becomes a Vaishnava, who is a self-realized learned Brahmana. And actually such person, because they're worshipping the Lord constantly, they attain all those good qualities that the demigods have as well. There's a verse like that, which explains that all the demigods and their exalted qualities, such as religion, knowledge, and renunciation, become manifest in the body of one who has developed unalloyed devotion for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudeva. So the pure devotee gets all those good qualities that the demigods have, and he becomes worshipable even to the demigods, and that's actually mentioned later. We will see under the heading of reciting notable prayers, there's this verse from the Skanda Purana. Devotees whose tongues are decorated always with prayers to Lord Krishna are always given respect even by the great saintly persons and sages, and such devotees are actually worshipable by the demigods. So even though the demigods are such exalted personalities and they are themselves devotees, they actually worship the pure devotee wherever he may be. And there were some cases where the demigods actually came to see Srila Prabhupada. We knew that because once it was in London where Yamuna Devi, she explains how Srila Prabhupada was sitting on a platform and she was leading a kirtan, and then suddenly Srila Prabhupada started glorifying Narada Muni. And she didn't understand what was going on. And then afterwards she asked, and he said, Narada Muni actually came. So the demigods came to see Srila Prabhupada because of his position. And every day we're singing to Srila Prabhupada, Ebe Jas Kushik Tribhuvana, which means his fame is spread all over the three worlds. That means in the higher planets, middle planets, and the lower planets. So that includes being known by the demigods. And there was a time where Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was going for a walk, and one of his disciples they were following him. And then they saw all of these very tall, celestial-looking people come towards his spiritual master, and they were embracing him, and they were speaking with him, and then they passed by. And then Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur turned around to his disciple. There was only one person, but he turned around to him and he said, "Oh, those were the demigods. They came to see the Sankirtan Yagya going on." So they came to meet him because he's a pure devotee. And then another example was when I was on Polish tour, I think about 3 years ago. Then Indra Jimnaraj came with us on Harinam, and then he pointed at the sky, at the birds, and he said, "You see those birds over there? Those are actually the demigods, and they came to see our Harinam today." Of course, we don't have the eyes to see the demigods, but they are here. And the demigods actually even pray to be born here during Kali Yuga, even though they have so much opulence, so much wealth, so much prestige, so much power. They pray to be born here in Kali Yuga to get the association of those devotees who worship Krishna, and to be able to participate in Lord Chaitanya's movement. Because Lord Chaitanya was here not so long ago, actually, and that mercy we're getting is just completely inconceivable. So that's why the glorifying of the Lord from wherever we are is more pleasing to the Lord than even Lord Shiva's prayers, even though Lord Shiva is such an exalted personality. For anyone who has given their whole hearts and their whole lives to glorifying the Lord, that person actually becomes more dear, so dear that Krishna brings them back to his abode. Okay, now the best part, well, one of the best parts, Sankirtan. When a person loudly chants the glories of the Lord's activities, qualities, form, etc., his chanting is called Sankirtan. Sankirtan also refers to the congregational chanting of the holy name of the Lord. In the Vishnu Dharma, there is a statement glorifying this process of congregational chanting. My dear king, this word Krishna is so auspicious that anyone who chants this holy name immediately gets rid of the resultant actions of sinful activities from many, many births. That is a fact. There is the following statement in Chaitanya Charitamrita. A person who chants the holy name of Krishna once can counteract the resultant actions of more sinful activities than he is able to perform. A sinful man can perform many, many sinful activities, but he is unable to perform so many that they cannot be wiped out by one single uttering of Krishna. So let's put our hands up and say, Krishna! Just like that. So thousands and thousands of sinful activities just got wiped away. But then we might think, wow, so purifying. That means I can do whatever I want and just chant Krishna. Yeah. But then that's actually not pleasing to the Lord. Because developing piety by being relieved of our sinful activities in itself is not going to please the Lord, is not going to bring us back to his abode. That in itself is not enough. He's not looking for us just becoming pure and that's it. He's looking for something more than that. He wants a commitment from us. And actually it's offensive to lean on Krishna and think, I can maybe not follow all the rules and I'll just lean on Krishna's name and I'll just engage Krishna in my service. Let him purify me. He knows I'm a rascal anyway. Let me do whatever I want and he's so purifying, so let me just chant Krishna and everything's okay. No, he wants to see that we're following properly, that we are serious. Otherwise, how will he take us seriously? Okay. In the 7th canto, 9th chapter, verse 18 of Srimad Bhagavatam, Prahlad Maharaj offers the following prayers to the Lord. My dear Lord Nrsimha, if I can be elevated to the position of your servant, then it will be possible for me to hear about your activities. I love that because it just reveals the heart of a devotee. He sees the position of being a servant as actually an exalted position. To be the servant of the Lord is so wonderful. You are the supreme friend, the supreme worshipful deity. Your pastimes are transcendental, and simply by hearing of them, one can counteract all his sinful activities. Therefore, I shall not care for all those sinful activities, because simply by hearing about your pastimes, I shall get out of all the contamination of material attachment. So, we can understand that although we may be remorseful for our previous sinful activities from thousands and thousands of lives, we don't even know what we've done, but if we can think about all the sinful activities possible to do, probably we have done all of them at some point. So we can be remorseful and at the same time understand that we don't have to undergo any other purificatory process apart from just focusing on the Yoga Dharma, because chanting in itself will give us everything we need. It will give us all that freedom from material entanglement. It will give us all that washing away and purifying of all those sinful activities, and it'll give us the highest benediction. It'll give us Krishna Prema. So no separate endeavor needs to be made. At the same time that we should be careful not to commit those offenses that we went through in that previous chapter, because we want to please the Lord, and we wouldn't please him if we're not being careful. There are many songs about the Lord's activities. For example, there is the Brahma Samhita, sung by Lord Brahma, Narada Pancharatra, sung by Narada Muni, and Srimad Bhagavatam, sung by Shukadev Goswami. If these songs are heard by any person, he can easily get out of the clutches of material contamination. There should be no difficulty in hearing these songs of God. They are coming down from many, many millions of years ago, and people are still taking advantage of them. So why, at this time, should one not take full advantage and thus become liberated? Shri Shri Radharanath ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. In the first canto, 5th chapter, verse 22 of Srimad Bhagavatam, Narada Muni tells his disciple Vyasadeva, "My dear Vyasa, you should know that persons who are engaged in executing austerities and penances, studying the Vedas, performing big sacrifices, chanting the hymns of the Vedas, speculating on transcendental knowledge, and performing charitable functions, have for all their auspicious activities simply to gain a place in the association of devotees and chant the glories of the Lord. It is indicated here that chanting about and glorifying the Lord is the ultimate activity of the living entity." So any opulence, any piety, any knowledge within itself is not enough for actually loving Krishna. But beyond that, if a person is fortunate, then they'll be able to actually associate with the devotees and chant the glories of the Lord, which will actually give that highest goal of life. Japa. So chanting a mantra or hymn softly and slowly is called japa, and chanting the same mantra loudly is called kirtan. For example, uttering the Maha Mantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, very softly, only for one's own hearing, is called japa. Chanting the same mantra loudly for being heard by all others is called kirtan. The Maha Mantra can be used for japa and kirtan also. When japa is practiced, it is for the personal benefit of the chanter, but when kirtan is performed, it is for the benefit of all others who may hear. But it's also true that if we're chanting the Maha Mantra softly, because the Maha Mantra is all purifying, even the little jivas around us get benefited. In the Padma Purana, there is a statement, "For any person who is chanting the holy name, either softly or loudly, the paths to liberation and even heavenly happiness are at once open." So when we're chanting, we can achieve all of our material desires, whatever they may be. We can go to the heavenly planets as well if we wanted to. And actually, Srila Prabhupada did say once that some of his disciples, because they still had so many material desires, they may end up in the heavenly planets instead of going to the Lord's abode. But there's a really beautiful verse in the Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 22, texts 36 to 38. We'll read. "Whether one desires everything or nothing, or whether he desires to merge into the existence of the Lord, he is intelligent only if he worships Lord Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by rendering transcendental loving service. If those who desire material enjoyment or merging into the existence of the Absolute Truth engage in the Lord's transcendental loving service, they will immediately attain shelter at Krishna's lotus feet, although they did not ask for it. Krishna is therefore very merciful. Krishna says, if one engages in my transcendental loving service, but at the same time wants the opulence of material enjoyment, he is very, very foolish. Indeed, he is just like a person who gives up ambrosia to drink poison." Such wonderful verses. Okay. Now the next part is entitled Submission. In the Skanda Purana there is a statement about submission unto the lotus feet of the Lord. It is said there that those who are sober devotees can offer their submission to Krishna in the following 3 ways. 1. Samprarthanatmika, which means very feelingly offering prayers. 2. Denya Vodika, humbly submitting oneself. And 3. Lalasamayi, desiring some perfectional stage. And then Srila Prabhupada explains that this desiring some perfectional stage in spiritual life is not the same as sense gratification. And that when he actually understands his constitutional position in relation to Krishna, then he he understands his original position and he wants to be reinstated in that position, either as a friend, as a servant, as a parent, or as a lover. And that is called lalasa mai, eagerly desiring to get to one's natural position. And this is a stage which comes when we are perfectly liberated. And it's technically called Swarup Siddhi, when the living entity actually understands by spiritual advancement that who he is in relation to Krishna. So it's explained that once a devotee starts to progress, they then see which mood resonates with them the most. So this is a stage probably far away from most of us, but it does come eventually where we're inspired to follow a particular devotee. Like, for example, if we're inspired to love Krishna as if he were a baby, in his form as a baby, then we'd follow Mother Yashoda. That's just one example. In the Padma Purana, there is a statement of submission in feeling by devotees praying to the Lord. My Lord, I know that... Okay, so then Srila Prabhupada gives this example of how young girls and young boys have natural affection for one another. And there's a prayer that, please, can our minds be as attracted to you, Krishna, in that same spontaneous way as that natural attraction we see between men and women in this world. And then Srila Prabhupada says that without any training, there is a natural attraction due to sex impulse. And he's referring to women and men in this world. This is a material example, but the devotee is praying that he may develop a similar spontaneous attachment for the Supreme Lord, free from any desire for profit and without any cause. This natural attraction for the Lord is the perfectional stage of self-realization. In the same Padma Purana, there is a statement about submission and humbleness. It is stated there, my dear Lord, there is no sinful living entity who is more of a sinner than myself, nor is there a greater offender than myself. I am so greatly sinful and offensive that when I come to confess my sinful activities before you, I am ashamed. This is a natural position for a devotee. As far as the conditioned soul is concerned, there is no wonder that he has some sinful activities in his past life, and this should be admitted and confessed before the Lord. As soon as this is done, the Lord excuses the sincere devotee. But that does not mean that one should take advantage of the Lord's causeless mercy and expect to be excused over and over again, while he commits the same sinful activities. Such a mentality is only for shameless persons. So this relates to what we were saying earlier, that we shouldn't just lean on Krishna and think that Krishna will purify me, let me engage still in sinful activity, even though I have confessed my sins and he has purified me. And then Srila Prabhupada speaks about he gives another example of lalasa mai, wanting to serve the Lord in a particular way, having that transcendental desire at the same time that you're submissive. And there's this prayer which can be found in the Narada Pancharatra. My dear Lord, when shall that day come when you will ask me to fan your body, and according to your pleasure, you will say, you just fan me in this way? The idea in this verse, Srila Prabhupada says, is that the devotee is desiring to personally fan the body of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That means he is desiring to become the personal associate of the Supreme Lord. Of course, any devotee in any capacity, either as servant, friend, or conjugal lover, always has direct association with the Lord. But according to his different individual taste, a person desires just one of these relationships. Here the devotee is desiring to become a servant of the Lord, and he desires to fan the Lord. And then there's another example in the Narada Pancharatra, which is an expression of submission, where the devotee says, "My dear Lord, O lotus-eyed one, when will that day come, when on the bank of the Yamuna I shall become just like a madman, and continue to chant your holy name, while incessant tears flow from my eyes?" And then Srila Prabhupada writes that this is another perfectional stage. And Lord Chaitanya, he also desired that a moment will appear unto me as 12 years of time, and the whole world will appear to me as vacant on account of not seeing you. And so Srila Prabhupada writes that one should feelingly pray and become eager to render his particular type of service to the Lord. This is the teaching of all great devotees, especially Lord Chaitanya. In other words, one should learn how to cry for the Lord. One should learn this small technique, and he should be very eager and actually cry to become engaged in some particular type of service. This is called lolyam, and such tears are the price for the highest perfection. If one developed this lolyam, or excessive eagerness for meeting and serving the Lord in a particular way, that is the price to enter into the kingdom of God. Otherwise, there is no material calculation for the value of the ticket by which one can enter the kingdom of God. The only price for such entrance is this lolyam lalasamayi, or desire and great eagerness. This reminded me of one of my favorite verses. It's Madhya Lila in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, chapter 8, text 70. Krishna bhakti rasa bhavitam atiha kriyatam yadi kutapi lavyate tatra lolyam api mulyam ekalam janma koti sukrite na labhyate. Pure devotional service in Krishna consciousness cannot be had even by pious activity in hundreds and thousands of lives. It can be attained only by paying one price, that is, intense greed to obtain it. If it is available somewhere, one must purchase it without delay. So that intense greed is what we need to actually attain that love for Krishna. No amount of anything else will get us there. But then we also have to understand where to get it from, because the verse is saying if it is available somewhere, we have to purchase it. So we have to purchase that bhakti with our desire to attain it, and that will come from the heart of a pure devotee. But we have to want it so much that we cry for it, and that's something that would also come later as we're continuing our practice of devotional service. And this is actually called weeping kirtan, where a devotee learns how to cry for Guru, how to cry for Krishna. And this crying is not ordinary crying. It's not like the same as just crying for something material. It's transcendental crying. The tears are not just ordinary tears, but it's actually coming from a realization of the mood of separation, which is what we're practicing to realize by chanting within our sampradaya. And then the next part is entitled Reciting Notable Prayers. So my Guru Maharaj explained to me that there are two ways we can recite prayers. One way is that we can recite prayers which come from our own hearts, our own minds. And another way is to recite those prayers from exalted devotees who have prayed to the Lord. And even though we may not be able to completely understand or connect with those prayers, still, if we recite the prayers, then something rubs off. It's like if you light a match and you're lighting a candle, then sometimes wax will stick to your finger. So in the same way, when we're chanting the prayers of Vaishnavas, even though we may not be on a level where we actually sincerely have that same mood, still something rubs off on the consciousness and it has an effect on the consciousness. And then here Srila Prabhupada explains that there are many prayers that we can chant from the Bhagavad Gita, from the Srimad Bhagavatam, glorifying the Lord and glorifying his devotees. And then there's just a part here where Srila Prabhupada gives some examples of how those prayers within themselves are glorious, and the devotees who chant them become glorious. He says, the pure devotees have nothing to ask from any demigod, but rather demigods are anxious to offer prayers to the pure devotee, because the devotee becomes glorious from reciting those prayers. Okay. And then the next part, partaking of prasad. There is this specific statement in the Padma Puran. A person who honors the prasad and regularly eats it, not exactly in front of the deity, along with charanamrita, the water offered to the lotus feet of the Lord, which is mixed with seeds of the tulasi tree, immediately can achieve the results of pious activities which are obtained through 10,000 performances of sacrificial rites. And we saw how Srila Prabhupada always gave prasadam. We can think about the early days of Srila Prabhupada's movement. He always had something to give. Even if it was just an apple, then he would cut it into small pieces and whoever was there would get a small piece. And then later he started cooking for everyone personally, and he would clean everything, clean everything by himself, because prasadam is such an important part of our practice of devotional service. And then the next part is entitled Drinking Charanamrita. Charanamrita is obtained in the morning while the Lord is being washed before dressing. And then it's explained that scented perfumes are added and flowers, and then this Charanamrita becomes sweet because it's gliding down the body of the Lord. And then it's explained that even one who has never done any pious activities will become eligible to enter into the kingdom of God if he simply drinks the charanamrita which is kept in the temple. Wow. So we keep our charanamrita out there. Make sure everyone when you leave gets some of that. Okay. Smelling the incense and flowers offered to the deity. In the Hari Bhakti Sudhodaya, there is a statement about the incense which is offered in the temple. When the devotees smell the good fragrance of the incense which is offered to the deity, they thus become cured of the poisonous effects of material contamination, as much as one becomes cured of a snake bite by smelling the prescribed medicinal herbs. So there's an analogy given there. Just by smelling the incense, we become purified from our material contamination. Just like if a person has a snake bite, he can become cured by smelling the correct herbs. And then the next part is touching the deity. So this I was mentioning in the beginning of the class. In the Vishnu Dharmottara, there is a statement about touching the lotus feet of the Lord. It is said, only a person who is initiated as a Vaishnava and is executing devotional service in Krishna consciousness has the right to touch the body of the deity. So there are certain standards that a person has to follow in order to be able to actually access personally serving the deity by dressing them and washing them. And actually Srila Prabhupada did mention that although Harinam Sankirtan is the Yuga Dharma, the pujari who is always engaged in personally serving the Lord on the altar is actually most close to Krishna, because this is what is done in the spiritual world. They are bathing Krishna, They are offering different items to Krishna, not in quite the same way, but this is what is happening in the spiritual world. And they're dressing Krishna so that the devotee who is on the altar is actually very close to Krishna. And then the next part is called Seeing the Deity. In the Varaha Purana, there is a statement praising the seeing of the deity of Sri Krishna in the temple. A devotee says there, "My dear Vasundhara, any person who goes to Vrindavan and sees the deity of Govinda Dev is free from the courthouse of Yamaraj and is allowed to enter into the highest planetary system in which reside the demigods." This means that even an ordinary person who goes to Vrindavan out of inquisitiveness and by chance sees the temple, especially that of Govinda Dev, even if he is not elevated to the spiritual kingdom, is still assured promotion to the higher planetary systems. This means that simply by visiting the deity of Govinda in Vrindavan, one becomes highly elevated in pious life. So, although we're not looking to go to the higher planets, we can still appreciate that simply by seeing the Lord in Vrindavan, we become so pious that even though we may be very sinful, we become eligible to go to the higher planets. And we can also appreciate that Vrindavan is here. Wherever Krishna resides is Vrindavan. So not just the Vrindavan we know in India, but all of the temples where Krishna is residing, that is Vrindavan. So if somebody happens to wander in accidentally and sees Radharani and Krishna, even though they may not know this is Radharani and Krishna, they'll become so pure that they'll be able to go to the heavenly planets after that. And then the next part is called Observing Arti and Celebrations of the Lord. In the Skanda Purana, there is the following description of the results of seeing Arti of the deity, which, like you all, at least a little bit, have seen that the Arti was going on. And every day for Mangala Arti, Gora Arti, and all the Artis in between, Midday Arti, you're seeing this Arti happening. So what happens then? If someone sees the face of the Lord while Arti is going on, he can be relieved of all sinful reactions coming from many, many thousands and millions of years past. He is even excused from the killing of a Brahmana or similar prohibited activities. As we have already explained, there are different ceremonies to be observed, such as the birthday of Krishna, the birthday of Lord Ramachandra, the birthday of some prominent Vaishnavas, the ceremony of Julana Yatra with the Lord sitting on the swing, and Dola Yatra, the Lord's activities in the month of March. In all festivals, the Lord is seated on a car, and the car moves through different streets of the city, so that people may take advantage of visiting the Lord. So, a most prominent festival worldwide is where Lord Jagannath goes on his cart for Ratha Yatra, and thousands of people will come and see the Lord, because he's going to see them, actually. In the Bhavishya Purana, it is said, in such a ceremony, even a Chandala, which is a dog-eater, simply out of curiosity sees the Lord on the cart, he becomes counted as one of the associates of Vishnu. Wow. In the Agni Purana, it is stated, any person who in gladness sees the worship of the deity in the temple will obtain the results of Kriya Yoga, which are described in the Pancharatra scripture. Kriya Yoga is a system of practice much like practical devotional service, but it is especially meant for the mystic yogis. In other words, by this gradual process, the mystic yogis are eventually elevated to the devotional service of the Lord. So we're reading about how engaging all of our senses in the service of the Lord, hearing the holy name through japa, through kirtan, seeing the deity of the Lord, smelling the incense offered to the Lord, smelling the flowers offered to the Lord. So by engaging all of our senses in the Lord's service, they actually become purified. And we went into a lot of detail about how it's purified. All of our sinful reactions are diminished, and we become eligible to become an associate of the Lord just by coming to the temple and engaging in whatever is going on at the temple, and offering items to the Lord is always going on in regulated ways. Singing in kirtan, all of this is always going on. So simply, if we just come to the temple, then we'll become so purified. And Srila Prabhupada explains that we cannot become desireless and we cannot become senseless. He said that to become desireless means to become a rock. So we have to desire, but it's just a matter of purifying those desires. And similarly, we cannot become senseless, but we can purify our senses by engaging all of our senses in the service of the Lord. But while we are engaging our senses in the service of the Lord, it's important not to think that Krishna will definitely purify us and so we can commit any sinful activity, because I'm reading about how it's all purified. We don't want to engage Krishna in our service. We don't want to commit aparad, because that's not pleasing to him, and that won't really allow us to connect with him as much as he's available to us. So we can be remorseful for what we have done and try to practice nicely at the same time that we can understand that we don't have to make some separate endeavor to purify ourselves. Just by engaging in the devotional service of the Lord, that will all be taken care of. And we were also discussing a little about how the Lord is not attracted by opulence and jnana or piety in itself. That in itself is not what's going to attract Krishna, but it's actually bhakti. And to get bhakti, we need lolya. We need to have this intense desire to get bhakti. And that will all come from the heart of a pure devotee. And Srila Prabhupada gives this example that when he was a child, his father said, you have two small hands, and Krishna is wanting to give you so much mercy. How are you going to accept all that mercy with your two small hands? So Krishna is always wanting to give us everything, but we have to be ready to receive it. And the way we're going to be ready to receive it is by becoming submissive to the process of devotional service, submissive to hearing about the glories of the Lord. And that submissiveness will come when we are actually humble, when we realize our position as an insignificant servant of the Lord. And then once we actually are there, we can constantly glorify the Lord. Trinata pisini chinata rora pisahishnana amanina manadina kirtaniyaha sadahari. When we're humble, we can constantly glorify the Lord. And then we will actually experience complete satisfaction, because we'll be completely satisfying the Lord. Hare Krishna. Are there any questions or comments or corrections? Yes. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for the wonderful class. As you were speaking, I was just thinking that to reach Krishna is a very tall order, and just by performing all these activities that's mentioned in the Nectar devotion, one can come closer to Krishna like this. But sometime, or most of the time, devotees have unfulfilled desires, and Krishna, he puts them in a situation where they actually purify themselves in whatever situation he puts them in. And when the purification takes place, then we find that it's a bit nasty. It comes out in a very nasty way. So, but this is all there to help us to actually reach Krishna, right? And he puts us in a situation where, it may look very ugly, right? So, but we, as practicing devotees now, we need to actually take that and understand that all these things are coming via Krishna through his mercy upon us, and not feel like antagonistic towards Krishna. Krishna, I'm doing so much for you. Why are you putting me in this situation? No, we should not feel like that. We should pray to the Lord more sincerely and think that, yes, Krishna, you're putting me in this situation because you need to purify my heart. Purification can be very, very nasty, as I said. It can be very nasty. We talk about purification like, it's one of those things. But actually, some devotees that I know of, I'm talking from many years of experience, that devotees, they cannot handle purification. And they actually commit suicide. Some of them commit suicide. And some of them leave the movement. Some of them, take shelter in other things. So just like a warning to devotees that when we're going through hardships, know that Krishna is purifying us to take us to the ultimate goal. And in that situation, whatever situation we are in, we should just hang on to Krishna's lotus feet and chant our rounds as usual and not give up on the chanting. Once one gives up on the chanting, then the whole spiritual life falls down. So we actually need to, in situations like that, we actually need to grab onto Krishna's lotus feet more and chant extra rounds so that, we can surpass all these purification that we're going through. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much for making that point. It's a good point because when I was speaking about purification, it seemed like, oh, this is so easy. It just gets washed away. But we can understand that sometimes that purification is really difficult to bear, very difficult to bear. And in those moments, we have to have faith that Krishna is our greatest friend, and whatever difficulty we have to bear that he's putting us through is really only because he loves us so much that he's willing to put us through absolutely anything just to bring us back faster. But in that moment, it's so difficult to see how this is Krishna's mercy because there's so much despair. But if we can actually continue our service in those moments, then it becomes our rightful claim to go back to the spiritual world. Srila Prabhupada explains this in relation to a word, daya bhak, becomes a rightful claim. Just like how if the son remains alive, all he has to do is remain alive to receive the inheritance from his father. So all we have to do is remain alive by continuously chanting, even through those difficult times, to be able to receive the highest goal, which is Krishna Prema, and he's trying to give us that through putting us through the most intense difficulties. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said that those who are most favored by the Lord find their path set with thorns. So if you're having some difficulty, that means Krishna loves you. He really loves you. He's favoring you. Thank you for that. Is there anything else? Okay. Nash, you had anything? Okay.
Hare Krishna. I was just thinking about a pastime related to what you mentioned, where one young disciple asked Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, I read in the Nectar of Devotion that it says we should meditate on a resident of Vrindavan. So I really like Mother Yashoda, I really like Nanda Maharaj, I really like the gopis, I really like the cowherd boys. So I'm not sure who I should meditate on. And then Prabhupada, in a booming voice, he said, I am that resident of Vrindavan. So She was just, young and naive, but Prabhupada was just emphasizing that he, being that resident of Vrindavan, if we just meditate on him, everything is achieved.
Thank you so much for making that point. Yeah, for us, we're not so advanced that we can understand in what mood we should worship Krishna in. But we can understand that worshipping our spiritual masters will lead to everything else. And it wouldn't be a question of, is it like this or like that? It would be something that comes naturally. And Prabhupada also gives us example, just like how we're reading, just like how a boy and a girl, nobody has to explain to them what sex life is. It's just something they understand. So eventually the devotee understands naturally, how do I love Krishna? It's not something that has to be explicitly explained. It's something from within the heart. But that comes later. We worship our spiritual masters. And we can appreciate and understand that we are not on such a high platform to be able to know how we should worship Krishna. Anything else? Krishna Chaitanya? Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki, Gaur Premanande.